United States has begun enforcing a naval blockade on Iranian ports in the Strait of Hormuz after failed talks in Islamabad over the weekend. The two-week ceasefire continues to hold, at least between U.S. and Iran for now. U.S. President Donald Trump said on Monday that Iran is still seeking a deal, but Washington will not accept any agreement that allows Tehran to develop nuclear weapons.
Has the blockade started, sir?
Yeah, started 10 o'clock.
President Donald Trump said a U.S. military blockade of ships leaving Iran's ports had begun on Monday, as Tehran threatened to retaliate against its Gulf neighbors' ports after peace talks failed to end the conflict over the weekend.
If they don't agree, there's no deal. There'll never be a deal.
Outside the Oval Office, Trump said Iran had been in touch on Monday and wanted to make a deal, but that he will not approve any agreement that allows Tehran to have a nuclear weapon.
We're not going to let that happen.
Earlier, Trump warned that any Iranian fast attack ship that goes near the U.S. maritime blockade would be, quote, eliminated. U.S. Central Command said the blockade would be, quote, enforced impartially against vessels of all nations entering or leaving Iranian ports in the Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. 2 Iranian-linked tankers laden with oil products left the strait on Monday before the deadline, LSEG data shows. An Iranian military spokesperson called any U.S. restrictions on international shipping piracy. NATO allies, including Britain and France, said they would not be drawn into the conflict by taking part in the blockade. Instead, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer told Parliament on Monday that he and French President Emmanuel Macron will convene a summit of leaders to, quote, ensure freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz.
And let me be very clear. This is about safeguarding shipping and supporting freedom of navigation once the conflict ends.
Iranian political analyst Mohammad Ghaddari said the U.S. blockade will only lift energy prices again.
Look, when the other side wants to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, logically surrounding it only adds another problem. But what is Trump's argument? His argument is that if Iran wants to prevent passage through the strait, then he will prevent Iran's passage in a much wider area. This does not solve America's problem. Yes, it imposes pressure on Iran, but it does not resolve America's problem. What does this mean? It means that the story of the escalating rise in energy prices will continue.
Trump announced the blockade after discussions in Islamabad between the sides over the weekend failed to reach a final agreement, including on lifting an Iranian threat to strike cargo ships transiting the Strait of Hormuz. Those talks came after Tehran and Washington agreed last week to a 2-week ceasefire. But on Sunday, Washington said Tehran rejected its demands, and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said they had encountered, quote, maximalism, shifting goalposts, and blockade from the United States at the talks. Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif said efforts were still on to resolve the conflict.
And now China has issued a strong warning to the United States, cautioning against any move to block the Strait of Hormuz. A senior Chinese official said Beijing opposes interference in its ties with Iran and stressed the need to keep the key waterway open. The Strait of Hormuz is critical for China, supplying nearly 40% of its oil imports and around 30% of its LNG needs. Now, Beijing says ensuring safe and uninterrupted navigation through the route is in the global interest, especially at a time of rising tensions.
霍尔木兹海峡是重要的国际货物和能源贸易通道。维护该地区的安全稳定和畅通，符合国际社会共同利益。海峡通航受阻的根源在于伊朗战事，解决这一问题的出路是尽快停火止战。各方应该保持冷静和克制，中方愿继续发挥积极建设性作用。
And even the European Union has raised serious concerns over the Strait of Hormuz blockade, warning of its impact on global stability. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said the disruption to shipping is greatly damaging, stressing that restoring freedom of navigation is of paramount importance.
The ongoing closure of the Strait of Hormuz is greatly damaging And the restoration of the freedom of navigation is of paramount importance for us. Since the beginning of the conflict, 44 days ago, our bill for fossil fuel imports has increased by over 22 billion euros. 44 days, 22 billion euros, not a single molecule of energy in addition. And this shows the enormous impact this crisis has on our economy.
And not just EU and China, Russia has also sharply criticized the US decision to block maritime access to Iranian ports, warning it could destabilize global markets. The Kremlin said the move by US President Donald Trump to enforce a blockade in the Strait of Hormuz is likely to further tighten an already strained energy market, pushing prices higher and increasing volatility.
Ну, скорее всего, такие действия продолжат негативно влиять на международные рынки. Это можно предположить с большой долей уверенности. Но тут многие детали остаются неясными, непонятными, поэтому я бы сейчас воздержался от каких-то субстантивных комментариев.
Meanwhile, Russia is ready to take in Iran's enriched uranium as part of a future peace deal with the United States, the Kremlin said on Monday. Russia, which possesses the world's largest stockpile of nuclear weapons, has repeatedly offered to host Iran's enriched uranium as part of any peace deal. The proposal was voiced by Russian President Vladimir Putin in contacts with both the United States and regional states. The offer still stands but has not been acted upon, according to the Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov.